Okay, guys. So welcome. Today we're going to be talking about getting started in diving. Sort of what does it take to get to take up diving? What are some of the
Testing one day. So we just want something like that. And what you know, we can actually just send the heart rate value.
Hello. Sorry. Okay. Okay. So today we're going to be talking about how to get started in diving and what are some of the what does an open water course look like? What are some of the attributes or prerequisites to become a diver? Also, why should you get certified in the first place, right? And lastly, how to go about picking a dive center. And like I said in the intro to the course, this is not going to be a session on sort of why you should dive with us. Although if you dive with us, that's great. It's going to be more general, sort of more general about sort of how do you pick a dive center, whether it's in India or wherever. And after that, I'll answer any questions you guys may have about the sport and so on and so forth. Yeah? So with that out of the way, let's get started. I'll quickly, so give me about, I'll just run through sort of what goes into an open water course. Now, diving is different from other sports in the sense that, if you go rock climbing or cycling or whatever, take up any sport, you don't really need to, you don't need to get a license, right? You don't need a license from someone to ride a bicycle. You don't need a license from someone to go hiking or mountain climbing or whatever. In diving, you do, and a lot of that comes from a liability point of view, because diving by itself is a very safe sport, but you actually need to know what you're doing. I don't know if you guys might there's something called an intro to scuba program or discover scuba diving, where you can go diving without, just go get a short briefing and then you go diving with an instructor and you get a taste of the sport. And that's fairly inexpensive. You don't need a lot of training. Anyone can do it. So the first question we get is, why should we spend so much money? For example, if you do discover scuba with us, that's about $4,500 to $6,500, depending on which option you choose. Whereas getting certified is $26,000. That's a pretty significant jump, right? So for people who are asking, why should we get certified? It's a lot cheaper just to try diving. Well, yes, it is. The thing to remember is when you do a try dive or discover scuba dive, your safety is the instructor's responsibility. So any professional dive center will generally try to do the dive in a very safe and controlled environment, a place where, which is shallow, not exposed to too much in the way of currents, and very predictable. So the reason for this is that, as an instructor, I'm an instructor, I've been an instructor for 19 years. If I take someone diving, yes, I can manage the safety, but there's a lot I cannot control. If someone gets panicky or whatever, that's not in my control. So to reduce the chances of that happening, I keep the diving as sort of benign condition as possible. The downside to that, of course, is that, the really exciting stuff of scuba happens in what I call the wilder sites, which are sort of deeper, more exposed to currents, etc. Because where there's currents, there's nutrients. Where there's nutrients, there's fish feeding. Where there's fish feeding, there's bigger fish hunting them. So that's where the action happens. So when you do a discover scuba, your depth limited typically to up to 12 meters. But when you get certified, you can go a fair bit deeper. So that's where that's the main reason to get certified. Now, in terms of actually what do you get out of certification? So what does a certification course involve? There's three parts to a certification course. There's theory. Back in my day, which is a long time ago, it used to be done by, you had to sit through a presentation, you had to watch a video, you had to read a book. You can do all of those, but these days it's usually done online and at home. We suggest that to people that, instead of going, whether you come to the Andamans or whether you go somewhere on holiday, instead of wasting your vacation time in a classroom, watching a video or doing theory, do it at home. So that's when, that also applies if you're doing a part of your training at your home city as well. Just you learn best at your own pace. And if you spend a week and a half before you start your in-water training, just doing the theory on your own, that's the most convenient way to do it. So that's academics. Generally with academics, what happens is while you do the bulk of the theory yourself, the dive center will then sort of reinforce the really important stuff with you. They'll test your knowledge and they'll go over anything you're not clear on. So it's not, you're not on your own. The dive center is going to help you out there. The second part is confined water training. This is where you learn to use your scuba equipment and sort of, and learn all the skills that sort of, that make you responsible, that train you to handle yourself in the water. Now you handle the day-to-day the things that happen on a dive and also any problems that might occur. So this takes about anywhere from, it depends on person to person. There's about 22 skills that you have to complete. And it depends on the comfort level of the person. I've had students who've powered through them about 45 minutes. And I have people who've taken 6-7 hours spread out over 2 or 3 days to complete it. So it takes what it takes. This should not be, the goal is, it's not time bound, it's sort of skills bound. When you learn those 22 skills, you've completed your confined water training. After that, the third thing that you do is your open water course, the open water dive, sorry. The open water course consists of 4 dives. These are done in the ocean at sort of depth starting from 6 to 9 meters, going all the way up to 18 meters. During these dives, you will repeat some of the skills that you've done in your confined water training. In the confined water training, you're learning to do the skills. In the open water dives, you're showing you can do the skills while on a dive, while under sort of wild conditions and so on and so forth. So that's the program in a nutshell. It typically takes about 3 to 4 days to complete the open water course. Although, like I said, again, that depends from person to person. I've had students who are super good in the water who've sort of completed all the requirements in a couple of days. And we've had people that take 5-6 days as well. So there's no sort of, hard and fast sort of timeline. Yeah. So with that out of the way, so let me just, first ask you guys, do you guys have any questions about the structure of the course or something like that? Actually, let me get rid of this annoying beach videos. Unfortunately, I'm not in a beach. I'm sitting in an apartment lockdown just like everyone else. I wish I was by the beach. Patna, are you in a forest or is that a background as well? You're on mute. So guys, any questions? No? Okay, so then let's talk a little bit about what are the requirements, prerequisites to becoming a certified diver. Learning to dive is fairly easy. The minimum age to get certified is 10. And the maximum age is, there's no maximum age. If you're capable of meeting the requirements, you're capable of becoming a certified diver. I've taught a gentleman who was either 69 or 70 years old. I taught him how to do his open water. He came back a year later to do his advanced with me. So, there's no upper limit. Obviously, if you're above the age of 65, we generally recommend that you speak to a doctor and get a health checkup done as a preventive. But that's about it. If you're in reasonably decent physical health, you can learn to dive. That said, when learning to dive from a health point of view, there are certain factors which may increase your risk when you dive. So what you have to do generally before you get certified, I ask your dive center to send you the medical form. Look through the medical form. Most of the issues there, actually, they're not absolute blocks to diving, but if you have any of the issues listed in the medical form, you may actually need to go to a doctor and and review and get the doctor's clearance first. Typically, what happens in such cases is that the doctor will give you some specific advice or medication or a best practice on what to do to manage the medical issue with diving. Very rarely does the doctor absolutely flat out say no. There are a few instances where it might be an absolute contraindication. For example, if you have epileptic fits in the last 2-3 years or something like that. But for the vast majority of things, if you can operate a car or operate heavy machinery or something like that, you're also okay to dive. Yeah? So that's a medical and fitness side. And in fitness, you don't really need to be super fit. If you can walk about 1 kilometer, if you can walk 5, 10, 15 minutes, you have the fitness to dive. It's not a very strenuous activity. In fact, when you get good at diving, it's really sort of an ambulatory nap. You're one step away from falling asleep. You're so relaxed and sort of floating around the water. So that's it. But you do need to know swimming. So the standards for the swimming standards for the open water course are as follows. You need to be able to float or tread water for 10 minutes. And basically, I can't float. When I stay in the water, I sink. So I can tread water. Basically, spend 10 minutes in deep water without drowning, really. That's about it. What you do, you can swim, lie on your back, tread water, whatever. 10 minutes of that. And you need to be able to swim 200 meters unaided. There's no time limit on this. You just have to cover 200 meters. So you can swim for a little bit. You can lie on your back and rest and recover. You can swim a little bit more. You can lie on your back, rest and recover, and keep it this way. So like I said, as long as you're able to eke out the distance, it doesn't matter how long you take. It doesn't matter what style you do. Either you can do crawl, breaststroke, backstroke, whatever. Or the other option to the 200 meter swim is 300 meters with mask, fins, and snorkel. So many people actually find this easier. If you have the swimming technique but perhaps don't have the stamina, it's sometimes easier to actually swim 300 meters with mask, fins, and snorkel. So you can do one of those two, and plus the float. So that in a nutshell is the requirements to get certified. So it's prerequisites to get certified. So any questions on this so far?
So certified for a basic course.
Yes.
It's a So basically, I have a question. If a person starts from a scrap, like from
Yeah.
the very beginning,
Yeah.
so how long approximately does it take to reach at a master's program?
So, okay, so let me, so the basic, the progression for getting certified as follows. The first course that you do, that you get certified, is something called the open water scuba diver,
Yes, sir.
open water course. The next, that's level 1. There's actually a level, half a level, which is called the scuba diver course, which is basically half of what I've just told you. You do half of the skills, half of the confined water skills, and you do 2 dives. And that, I mean, to me, that's a bridge course, because that's not really as useful as being fully trained. But it is kind of, it's generally, I recommend that for people who are maybe tight on a budget and or tight on time, or not comfortable enough to get certified at one go. But generally, open water scuba, basically, you're trained to dive up to 18 meters without professional supervision. So it's known as, it's a level 1 autonomous diver. Level 2 is the advanced course, and that's just 5 dives, and you can do that immediately after certification as well. And in fact, we generally recommend doing that after certification for reasons I'll talk about in a little bit. And then after that, the next level is a rescue diver. And a rescue diver is basically, you learn actually how to rescue. You learn what goes into diving accidents, what causes them, how to prevent them before they happen, and how to handle them as and when if and when they occur. So that's the third level. And after you complete those 3 courses, a rescue diver also requires you to have CPR first aid as a prerequisite. That's a non-diving specialty. It can be something like emergency first responder. That's a program we teach. It can be Red Cross.
Is that program is under the PADI school or something, or if it can be done from anywhere in any part of the world?
Yeah.
Because I'm in merchant navy right now, so I have done these courses already.
Yeah, so if your training certificate says you're trained in CPR and first aid, it's valid. It's acceptable. It has to be within the last 2 years, I think, which is similar for merchant navy as well.
I have a DGCP report for that.
Yeah, so that can be by any agency. So once you get to rescue diver, and once you have 40 log dives total, you can then start your dive master program. So that generally takes, at minimum, if you just do block to block, it takes about 15 to 20 days to knock off the requirements to start your dive master program. If you spread it out, obviously it can take longer.
And if there's an interval of around 6, because after this year I'll be joining a ship or something, so I'll be like 6 to 8 months on ship and other time at there. So is it an interval quite enough?
Yeah, you can split up exactly as you want. That's not a problem at all. In fact, a couple of our very regular divers are also shippies. So one of them is sailing around the coast of Argentina right now, and another, I think, Lindsay said she was back in California. So yeah, so we do have a lot of people do that.
I guess they will sail a little more, because right now, being locked down, they are not allowed to come home.
Sorry?
Most of my friends are also stuck in ship right now.
Yeah.
So they can't come home right now.
That's what he said as well, that when they got to port, they had to stay inside.
Yeah, exactly. That's not in our hands, actually. It's not in seafarers' hands.
So anyway, so this is the open water course. So now let's talk about sort of how do you pick a dive center, or how do you pick? You know, the first thing people always ask is, actually, very quickly, one question is, what if someone has had an angioplasty in the past year? Okay, so now heart diseases are actually an area to be very careful about. One of the leading causes of fatalities among recreational, at least recreational divers, who are experienced recreational divers, tends to be actually heart problems, especially in the US. A lot of people tend to be on the larger side and above the age of 50, 55. When you dive, because of greater pressure of water, your heart does work a little bit harder. That said, an angioplasty by itself is not necessarily the procedure is not the roadblock to diving. It is your recovery, how well you recovered, and sort of how well your heart is working after the procedure. That is the factor. That is something you definitely should discuss with your doctor before you sign up for a diving course. Asha is asking, does diving have any Discover Scuba have any prerequisites? No. The minimum age for Discover Scuba is also 10. There's something called a bubble maker program, which you can start at the age of 8, which is very similar to a Discover Scuba, but depth limited to 2 meters. Not that different from a swimming pool. But other than that, no, you don't need to know swimming for a Discover Scuba program either. As I said, it's an intro program. It's a guided dive. The analogy I use is sort of a Discover Scuba is sort of like going to a zoo and seeing the animals. So, you get a sense of what's out there. And being a certified diver is sort of like going on safari and actually seeing them in the wild. So it's just that sense of space, the sense of wildness actually is significantly higher when you actually dive as a certified diver. So now, let's talk. So looking into sort of how do you pick a good dive center? Right now, the thing is, the first thing with the courses, you have to realize that people learn at different paces. There's 9 people in this grid, and each of us, I think partners, I think open water certified maybe. So each of us, everyone has a different. When you start doing a course, you have a certain level of comfort in the water. For some people, especially people who are swimming, or it can be pretty high. I learned to dive when I was a competitive swimmer, and so I had actually very little fear of the water. So for me, everything came fairly easy in terms of the skills. Other people who have not spent a lot of time in the water, not necessarily the best swimmers, for them it might be a little bit harder to not only to get mentally comfortable in the water, but also to understand how their body reacts in the water. When you spend a lot of time swimming, you sort of know how your body feels in the water, right? And if you haven't spent a lot of time in the water, that takes a little bit more time to sort of to develop those skills. So everyone starts from a different point, and then everyone learns at a different pace. So the first thing to look at the course is, when you talk to a dive center, just ask them, how is your course structured? So first of all, how many people are there in a course per instructor? By standards, you're typically allowed to have up to 12 students per instructor in a swimming pool environment, confined water, and 8 per instructor in open water. Then if you have some dive masters, the ratios increase, but those are maximum ratios. So typically dive centers generally don't reduce the ratios by a fair bit. For example, we generally don't do more than four students per instructor or whatever, so it can vary from place to place. So the first thing is I just get a sense of sort of what the student to instructor ratio is going to be like. But there's going to be a trade-off. Generally, like for example, Thailand has used to be, at least 10 years ago, used to be famous for fairly inexpensive courses, but they used to have very high student to instructor ratios. So that was the trade-off. If you have spent 1 hour in the water, you'd get maybe 10 minutes of instructor time. And but the upside was, you paid a lot less for your certification. There's a trade-off there. The second thing to ask is, what happens if you don't learn? If just get a sense of how the course is going to be structured. If I'm struggling with the skills, what happens then? If I don't feel comfortable after a certain amount of time, what happens then? Because from a business point of view, as a dive center, and just not just as a business point, as instructors, we all want our students to learn to dive. No one gets into diving because they're going to be making huge amounts of money. Pretty much everyone gets into diving because they like the sport. So I'm an instructor, like I said, I've been teaching for 19 years, and I still enjoy sort of watching people get hooked to the hobby. So instructors typically want to push their students to get certified. So sometimes what can happen is that the student sort of has met the requirements, has completed skills. Okay, instructor says, okay, you're done. But you, from a learning point of view, while you might have completed the skills, maybe you're not feeling so comfortable about it, right? You're like, okay, I've done whatever, I've done skill X. I've completed, but you know what? I feel like I need more practice. What happens then, right? So those are things you want to clarify. Because ideally, when you pick a course, you want a course where sort of you will not feel rushed, where you will have time to practice the skills that you need to practice at your own pace. And if you don't feel confident, you want to spend some more time polishing the skills, there'll be a system to let you do that. So that, fundamentally, that's really the basis on how you should select a dive center. Now, there's a level of granularity below the dive center as well. Like, for example, Dive India, we've got about 14 instructors, and every instructor's got their own teaching style. I have one way of teaching, Vikas has another way of teaching, Saeed has another way of teaching, and Melissa has another way of teaching, and so on and so forth. So the next question is that, for example, me, I've taught, I've maybe about 1,500 certifications under my belt. But I still have, I have my way of teaching now. Like all these gray hairs mean that, I teach one way now. Old dog, new tricks don't happen. So you might find, if you're learning to dive with me, that perhaps my teaching style does not match, the way you like to learn. Perhaps you find that I'm too impatient, or I'm not assertive enough, or I'm too sarcastic, or whatever. So in addition to, even though all 14 of our instructors teach under the same sort of system on sort of giving students time to learn, etc., because individual teaching styles vary, it's always sometimes a good idea to sort of to have it, if you can, to have a chat with the instructor beforehand to get a sense of what they're like. That's not always possible, right? For example, if you book a diving course with us 2 months down the line, we can't tell you who's going to be your instructor because we just have no way of knowing. Depends on what's happening before, after, and so on and so forth. But at the very least, when you get to the dive center, you can have a chat with the instructor and find out sort of what, get to know them a little bit. Or even if during the course, if you're learning and you find that, hey, you know what, maybe the instructors, I don't find the instructor I don't find it easy to learn from this instructor, or his or her styles are matching mine or whatever. Consider, maybe just going and asking for a different instructor. So a dive center where you have a choice of instructors to work with is also, gives you that little bit of flexibility of finding the right instructor that will, make the sport fun for you and also fill you with confidence that when you get done, you can go diving on your own. Yeah. Because ultimately, really it boils down to this. And you'll notice I didn't say anything about price. Now, obviously, I'm biased, right? I'm a dive center. I want you to spend all your money, all your income, just send it to us, and then we teach you to dive, right? For next year, send us all your money. We'd like that, but really, it's not just that. The thing that I always tell people with any kind of diving program, whether it's a Discover Scuba or an open water course or whatever, it's a little bit like, let me ask you, it's not like buying potatoes, right? A potato is a potato is a potato. Whether I buy at my local shop at the Nilgiris or whatever, ultimately I'm getting the same vegetable. Okay, give or take a little bit. But diving a little bit is a little bit more actually, like going to, for example, like a school or college. You can get a college degree or a master's degree or whatever from many different places, right? You can get it from an Ivy League college. You can get it from a state university. You can get it from, Happy Lucky University in Punjab or whatever. So there's a very wide range of institutions where you can get a degree. And in all cases, you end up with a degree. But are all degrees the same? I don't think I'm going on a limb by saying that there's a significant difference in sort of, in the quality of education across various establishments. Diving works the same way. In theory, an open water course is an open water course, The standards are set by PADI or SSI or whoever. And then they're all courses in theory are taught the same minimum sort of standards, right? But there definitely is a lot of wiggle room. For example, for every skill, you have to define something called mastery. The student has to master the skills before they continue onwards. Now, what is mastery? Mastery can mean different things, right? It could be, if you're able, let's say, talk about clearing your mask. You put on a mask, getting water out of the mask. The most basic skills you learn in diving. Maybe you spend 3-4 minutes kind of fumbling and you do it. That's mastery. Maybe you do it once and just barely get it right. That's mastery. Or maybe you can do it comfortably, while doing other things. That's also mastery, right? There's how things are interpreted. There's a lot of variability in how things are interpreted. How much time you get to relax. Another thing with diving is that, it's in many ways the skills are like sort of imagine taking something like cooking. When you're learning to cook, if I should say, this is how you chop, this is how you slice, this is how you roast, this is how you boil, this is how you steam. If I teach you all these things together and say, now you're a cook, does that really work? No, right? You have to know how to put all those things together as well, right? So the skills in diving are like those individual aspects of cooking, how to chop, how to slice, how to roast or whatever. You still need to know how to put them all together. And that's where the instructor comes in. The way I teach now, for example, is fairly different from the way I used to teach, when I first became an instructor. Through experience, you learn. Having, as instructors as well, having more experienced instructors to mentor you along helps. And then the environment in which you're working, how much time you have to work with a student, and what's your goal. If my goal is just to check out the 20 skills, I'll teach a certain way. If my goal is to make you a good diver, there's a lot more I add to the course, right? So the point I'm trying to make is that certification, it's not, this is not a commodity product, right? So different schools do teach it differently. Different instructors teach it differently. The same instructor might even teach it differently across across different courses. So the way you increase your odds is by speaking to instructors, or by looking at, talking to maybe other students who dived there before or whatever. At the very just have a chat with them about what you want to learn, how you want to learn, what your expectations are, how the course is going to be conducted, and use that to decide that, hey, you know, am I getting the sort of vibes from this place that would that make me feel comfortable learning here? Am I being rushed into sort of, you know, paying money, or are they actually interested in making me a good diver? I mean, that to me is far more important than sort of looking at whether the course is 1,000 rupees, 2,000 rupees cheap or not. Because I can guarantee you, you pay 3,000 rupees less for a course, you get a course that cuts corners or doesn't really sort of fill you with confidence, and you wasted that money. It's false economy to take a less robust course just to save a little bit of money. And cutting corners, I always tell people this, you know, you've not dived before, you're not certified. If I could teach a course, I can cut probably 20% of the course. I can cut corners, and you will not know the difference. I mean, how would you? You've not learned to dive, right? So it's yeah. I mean, obviously, now, I realize that money matters, right? I mean, we don't have infinite budgets, but to find a good school first, and then worry about money, as opposed to, you know, saying, oh, which is the cheapest place I can learn to dive, and then working around that. Yeah? So Asher, how many skills do we have to do? There's about, I think, 22 or 24 skills, Asher, that you have to do. They range from very simple stuff like sort of, you know, taking your weight belt off and putting it back on, to very relatively more complicated things like taking your BCD off underwater and putting it back on, and so on and so forth. So there's a list of skills, and, you know, when you do the theory, you actually you watch a video on each of the skills, and then so you know what you know all the skills that you'll be doing. So it's not like yeah, you will know if something is missed out or whatever. And also, speaking of this, also when you're learning to dive, it's also important that you as a participant, you know, take an active interest in your learning, right? I mean, if I'm teaching and I go, are you okay? Do you understand? And you go, yes. You know what? I'll assume you've understood. I'm not a mind reader yet. You guys are adults. No one's put a gun to anyone's head and said, come dive with me, right? It's a fun sport. So I would expect that participants are sort of involved a little bit in what they're in the learning. So, so because you're paying for the time, you're paying for the instructor's time, use that time well. If you're not sure, ask. If you don't understand something, ask. If you're not certain on why something has been done a certain way, ask. If you're not happy about how something's been done, ask. You know, you can always go back and let's say leave a bad review or send them a stinker of an email. You know, sure. But does that help you with your diving? No. When you leave, it's and I say because, you know, it's happened with us as well. Like I'd like to think we are a fairly committed dive center to sort of, you know, to make sure people learn to dive properly with us. But instructors make mistakes sometimes, and sometimes there's miscommunication, right? I thought I'd done a great course, and you sitting there going, Jesus, Vinny doesn't know what he's talking about. You know, I didn't understand this. He rushed through here. He just asked me once if it's okay, whatever. There can be miscommunication. So you go home and then you're like, you write a letter saying Vinny's useless, you know, and okay, maybe, you know, that doesn't help you, right? So when you're learning, focus on your learning. If you're not clear, you paid money, you have rights as a customer, make sure you get your money's worth out of the training, right? If you're not clear, ask. You shouldn't finish the course and be like, I wish I'd spent a little bit more time doing that or whatever, right? So yeah, so exactly. So that sort of, you know, gives my sort of very top level overview of sort of, you know, how what your expectations should be from a dive center as well. Do you guys have any questions? Okay. So this is going to be one of the shortest sessions we've done actually. Great. So okay. So I guess if yes, Neha.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so I just wanted to check. So I think what I understood so far is that there is something called the confined waters, and then there would be the some course that you mentioned, and then the open water scuba, right? But it's not required for us to go for the half that in between course. Maybe from confined waters we can directly go for an open water scuba.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, and how do we go about this? So if I'm looking at maybe doing this maybe sometime later this year, or maybe so how does this work? Like that was one question I had. And the second question I had was, I have heard about PADI and also the other one, I think it's called yeah. So how do we decide, like for someone who's just a beginner, how do we decide which one is good, or what is the difference between the two? Or just if you could help me out.
Good question. Actually, just before that, let me quickly clarify what the scuba diver course is. So basically, School, like I said, it's an intermediate course. So if someone is not able to complete the full open water course, for example, they can choose to get certified as scuba diver. But like I said, typically, so if you do let's say the confined water and you do 2 dives, you can say, okay, I want to stop here. I don't feel comfortable going deeper, so you can basically then stop at scuba diver. But like I said, if you're comfy, it's better to go all the way to open water. It's also more economical that way because every certification, there's a cost involved in actually getting the card. You have to pay to the agency. So that's it. Now, to answer your question, when to get started. So generally, I recommend is, there's like I said, there's 3 parts, right? There's academics, there's confined water, and there's open water. In theory, you can start your course at any time, and then you can stop, and then you have 1 year to continue with the program. So I can do the theory now. Within 1 year, I can then sign up for the confined water training. 1 year after finishing the confined water training, I can then do the open water course. And actually, I can even break up my confined water training into like 3 parts and do them all separate by year. So in theory, you can actually probably take about 10 years actually to complete your open water course. But obviously that's not a good way to learn because your skills atrophy, you forget what you're doing. So my general thing is you plan on when you're going to go on a dive holiday. You start with your open water dives first. So let's say you decide I'm going to go on a diving holiday in November this year, assuming we don't all become zombies. So okay, so I'm going to dive. So then you have a couple of choices. You can say, okay, if I go to someplace where there's a full service dive center, I can decide to do my entire course there, and then it becomes easy. You might decide that I don't have too much vacation time. Maybe I have a friend who's not a diver or whatever. I want to minimize my classroom time when I'm on holiday. And then you can say, okay, I live in Delhi and we have a dive center there. I want to do some of my training at home. So in that case, you say, okay, if I'm going in November, I do your confined water training maybe 2-3 weeks before you go for your open water dives. The reason for that is you don't want too long a gap, because if you wait 1 or 2 months, you do start to get a bit rusty with what you've learned. And you don't want to make it too close to one another as well. For example, if you're flying out day after tomorrow, you do a session today, and maybe you're feeling nervous, you need 1 extra day to dive, what then, right? So you want to give yourself some buffer, so you have a few extra days to do additional training if need be, but you don't want to make that buffer far too long. And then once you have a confined water schedule, then before that you plan on doing your theory sort of in the week before you do your confined water dives. And actually, that's actually the good point that I forgot to touch upon is that you can actually break up your course. So for example, and this is what a lot of people in the US do, right? In the US, if you live in, let's say, somewhere in the Midwest or somewhere where there's no ocean, you can do your theory at home. You can do your confined water in a swimming pool. Then you take something called a referral form, and then you go diving somewhere, and you show them the referral form that says you've done your prerequisites, and then they take you to the ocean, you do 4 dives, and you're certified. So for example, if you're in Delhi, you can do the theory in confined water with our dive center there, and then anywhere you go for all it takes is 2 half-a-days, and you can complete your course. Now, about your question about the PADI or SSI. So some background for I still am a PADI and SSI instructor. I used to be a NAVI instructor trainer. Then I still am a PADI SSI instructor trainer. So I certify instructors, and I'm also a PADI staff instructor. So I also do some I can do assistant instructor training with PADI as well. In theory, actually, so the agencies were the least important of whether you do PADI or SSI, at least at the recreational level. There are some differences. We used to be a PADI and SSI center before, and now we've only become PADI. And honestly, 99% of that was driven not by so much by difference between 2 agencies, but like back-end stuff that doesn't really affect your life as a diver, but affects the operational and business side of diving. And so, because ultimately, diving is diving, right? To learn to dive, you have to know a few things. You have to know how to clear your mask, how to share air in emergency, how to swim properly, blah blah blah, and a few things. So all the different agencies do it. They slice and dice it a bit differently, right? So they say, okay, it's like getting butter chicken from one restaurant versus from a different restaurant. You might have a slight preference for one or the other, but ultimately, butter chicken is butter chicken, within reason, right? It's more than that. It's actually the cook. Yeah, I know, Pratna. I food on my mind. I've been in lockdown for far too long. Ultimately, it's probably the cook that's probably more important, right? So it's the same way with diving. your PADI has a, you know, I mean, I have some opinions on sort of where the minor difference between the two courses are, which is better or not, but probably different instructors will have a different opinion. But ultimately, if you get taught a PADI course by a good instructor, and you get taught an SSI course by a good instructor, more or less you end up at the same place. That's it. I do think that the pure minimum standards of the new PADI program are actually a little bit better than what they announced 2 years ago. At least it's more in keeping with the diving into philosophy of teaching, which is also one of the reasons why we sort of moved over to PADI only. But it's not an earth-shaking difference. It's not necessarily something that makes you go, well, you know, in that case, I'll do PADI only. It didn't make any sense for us to do PADI and SSI together at that time if we thought one was slightly better. But if given a choice between two different places, the variability of the instructor and the variability of the dive center is far, far greater than the small variation that you have in the open water course. And the other thing is also, you can start out with one agency and switch to the other. Now, SSI does have some advantage in some of the specialties. I think they're quite efficient in how they teach them. So you can start with a PADI open water course and then do an SSI specialty and then do a NAVI course on something else or whatever. All agencies recognize each other's certifications. At the professional level, there are a few more differences that come into play, but you know that's some ways down the road. Ashray is asking, how long are the certifications valid? Certifications are valid for a lifetime, Ashray. So once you get certified, you are certified for good. That said, if you haven't dived for a year or so, it is usually a very good idea to do a refresher before you get in the water. This is just a quick, especially if in the early days of your diving. Right? If you've been diving for 10 years, you have 700 dives, and you're okay. If you just learn to dive and you've gone, 6 months, a year and a half, it's a good idea to do a practice session. This can be done in a swimming pool. This can be done as a check dive with an instructor when you go on diving holiday. But in principle, your certification is valid forever. Sorry, did I answer your questions there?
Yes. Thank you so much.
And can PADI certified people go to an SSI dive center for diving? Absolutely. Now, PADI, SSI, they are certification agencies. So what they do is they put the logo behind the card and saying that, okay, when Vinny's teaching, it's not just a letter from my mom saying, okay, Vinny's a good instructor, please, please recognize the certification. It's PADI saying, okay, when Vinny has taught, he's taught to our standards and so on and so forth. Diving, so PADI, SSI, the training agencies, they don't actually control how you dive. The reason dive centers look for certification so that if you come to me with a card that says you're PADI trained, I know that you've been taught to dive properly. So all dive centers will recognize certification training cards from any recognized agency. PADI, SSI, NAVI, SDI, RAID, BSAC, CMAS, French Federation. There's a whole bunch of them. So yeah, you're not limited to only PADI dive center, only SSI dive centers. So I'll leave you. Okay, so since I think if anyone else has any questions, I'm happy to take them now.
Very.
Sure, Rishabh.
Rishabh here. Yeah. So when I was looking out for one dive center to take this open water and advanced open water course, so I quite often used to read this. This is a 5-star PADI dive center. That is 5-star PADI dive center. So what exactly does that mean, and how much does it affect?
So we are a PADI 5-star dive center. You know what it means? It means we're awesome, and you should only dive with us and not dive with anyone else. No, actually, actually, it's funny enough. PADI 5-star basically means that one is you're exclusively PADI, right? You cannot teach any other agencies. You're exclusively PADI. You focus on PADI. You also need to have a certain volume of experience. So you have if you're a PADI 5-star dive center, it means that you've done a certain you have a certain history. You've done a certain number of courses without having any complaints or any registered complaints against you, and you meet certain minimum requirements in terms of more than minimum requirements in terms of standards and so on and so forth. Honestly, if you put gun to my head, does it matter so much? No. I mean, our open water course is about the same. We earlier used to be a PADI and SSI dive center. Now we're PADI only. I mean, I don't think we're any better or worse, at any of those 2 points, right? So I don't think it matters that much, quite honestly. Yeah, it sounds great though, so yeah, Patty 5-star, that's the way to go.
Okay, and a follow-up question on that is,
Yes.
in India, there are not a lot of dive centers, right? So it's fairly easy to choose one. But after the certification, if you are going to some other country for diving, let's say for fun diving, or to take some other course, so how should you how to select a better dive center?
That's
Because
really,
in other countries there are hundreds of dive centers, right?
for sure. So, actually, on that note, actually, I'm doing a talk in a couple of days' time about how to smooth your diving, how to have a smooth diving trip and diving etiquette. Join in on that as well. I'll be talking about this in more detail there. But what I use, what I do is I just simply email a bunch of dive shops, and some shops will just copy and paste an answer for me, and some shops will send me a more personalized reply. And whichever shop I get the best vibes from, I go dive with them. Or if it's a place where I don't necessarily need to book in advance, I'll just walk into a dive shop. And places where the guys seem friendly and welcoming, I'll go dive with them. That's sort of my. But again, keep in mind that of course for me, like it might be different for someone who's new to diving, who might be a little bit nervous or might be a little unsure about the dive skills. So if that's the case, then what I suggest you do is it's just very simple. You just be very, very honest with the dive center, saying that, hey, I've just got certified. I don't have a lot of experience. I want to dive, I want to get better, but I would like, and then take it from there. See what they say. A good dive center will sort of accommodate you. They'll maybe pair you up with a more experienced dive guide. They'll put you in a smaller group and so on and so forth. So those are some of the things you look for, like what is the group size? When you're diving, sort of what happens if in a group, if one person runs low on air, does everyone else come up? Or, or do you just the people who are low on air, do they come up together? Um, and then just ask if you're a beginner diver, ask how it might work for you. Because obviously, if you're a beginner diver, you probably don't want to be diving with like 6 other people who all have 200 dives, because they might be doing profiles that you're not comfortable with, or they might be limited to your shallow profiles that they're not happy, and then no one's really happy. So just try to make sure dive center can accommodate your preferences and interests. And like I said, the best way to do it is just chat with them, like email them, see what kind of replies you get, and so on and so forth. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, Vinny, I'm sorry that I had already asked this question. So my brother has just got his angioplasty a couple of months back, and when you gave the answer, I'm sorry, the network was very choppy, so I was not able to hear too well.
Sure.
But just want to know, I think what you said, what I could catch is maybe that it's okay, but he should get like a certificate from his doctor or a go ahead from his doctor.
A little bit more than that. So the thing is, Shreya, the medical forms that you have in there's a lot of things in there, right? Some of them are like in the real world are probably not significant issues. Like one thing is if you have frequent colds or sinusitis. I mean, obviously, if you're getting that a lot, it's a good idea to get a doctor's clearance to understand why it's happening. But that's the repercussions of that are obviously on a different level from something like where if you're frequently subject to seizures and epilepsy, where if you have something like that happening underwater, it can be fatal. Right, so while there are a whole bunch of medical issues, there's a grading scale, right? Some are not so critical and some are on the high end of critical. Heart-related issues on me are on the higher end of critical because when you're diving, because the greater pressure, you actually does put a slightly greater load on your heart. So in the case of angioplasty, it's not so much the angioplasty itself that's the issue. It's the degree to which you recovered and your heart function after the angioplasty. There's also a healing time after this. I do know people that have had angioplasty that have been able to dive, and I also know a few people for who have been absolutely sort of prevented from diving. In general, I would generally say that if the person is clear to do moderate aerobic exercise, like maybe go a little jogging or play some sports like tennis or whatever, then diving will not be a problem. But this is something definitely you need to discuss with your doctor. And if you're not sure about a doctor, you can contact us and we can put you in touch with a diving specialist doctor that we use. And you have a quick consult with him and he'll let you know what to do. He tends to be on the conservative side, which is probably a good thing for India. So, yeah.
Yes. Okay. So also the other thing that I wanted to know is like when we decide where we are going to, like when you decide a location to do your course,
Yeah.
is there anything that somebody needs to keep in mind when they're choosing a location where they can?
Yes, I mean, obviously, like, okay, I'll give you an example. I did my dive master, my DM, and most of my diving in Boston, right? And people getting certified, I remember I was helping out on the open water course. I'm in a dry suit with a very nice insulated layer underneath, and after about 2 hours or so, I was getting cold. And I'm looking at these people in rented wetsuits with holes and gaps in them, and going, "You people really must enjoy diving to suffer through this, right?" Now, if you're just learning to dive for the first time, it's nice to do in a place actually where there's stuff to see, just because then you have an idea of sort of why you're doing this as well, right? So if I'm going traveling somewhere for diving holiday, I mean, if I'm going to travel somewhere to learn to dive, I'll travel somewhere where there's good diving, so I get to get certified. Just because then, while I'm also, one is then if you're nervous, you actually start seeing the fish that motivates you to, like, okay, this is why I dive, this is why I'm doing this, and so on and so forth. But there's also some benefit to doing it in a place which is not in a location setting, because, for example, we do dive training in Chennai, and if you ask me how's the diving in Chennai, and I go, it's okay, it's nice. I wouldn't come here for a diving vacation, but if I'm here, nothing better to do, I can go diving and have a pleasant couple of days and have decent dives. But so if you're going to the Andamans, I'll just use India as an example, right? If you going to the Andamans, there's flight involved. If you're going all that way, you probably want to spend a week of vacation and so on and so forth. So it becomes a holiday, like it becomes a commitment in time, vacation from office, and expense as well. The upside is you get better diving and so on and so forth. On the other hand, if you really want to just quickly do it, focus diving, you've tried diving, it's for you, or really excited about the sport, then you can do it somewhere, for example, which is a bit more convenient from a location and logistics point of view. So that trade-off really depends on your personal equation, right? I mean, but I generally recommend to people that if possible, doing it in a place where diving is nice is never a bad idea, right? So, does that answer your question?
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Yes, thanks.
Now, Asha is asking, do we need to buy equipment? No, absolutely not. And again, I'm going back to my in the US. It's funny. A lot of places, when you learn to dive, you actually have to buy at least your mask, fin, and snorkel. And some places even require you to buy a full BCD and regulator. I cannot disagree with that strongly enough. When you're learning to dive, you don't know if you're going to like this sport. You don't know if it doesn't make any sense to. And even if you are going to stick with the sport, you don't know how to pick equipment, right? I don't know either. I can't recommend equipment for you guys either, because I don't know your preferences. I don't know which one, if he's a good swimmer, which was a weaker swimmer, who prefers frog kick, who prefers a flutter kick, whose legs sink, whose legs float, and so on and so forth. So for you to pick equipment, it helps to actually learn to dive and have gotten some dives under your belt. At that point, you can make informed decisions on picking, option A versus option B. As a beginner, you absolutely do not. The only thing that you might want to consider buying at the start of a course or in the early days of a course is a mask. If you have a mask that leaks a lot, or it pinches your nose or something, then it's nice to have a mask that fits. And that's pretty easy to figure out what fits. But everything else, I suggest you wait a little bit. Get certified, do some dives, and have your preferences crystallize, and then you make the investment. So, yeah. Okay, cool. So, guys, so I'll leave this just one last thought, right? So, I mean, just on diving, it's an absolutely a lot of people I know across the industry, like almost over 80% of people that get certified then often don't dive as much as they could, and that to me is an absolute shame, because diving it's for me it's life changing. Let me tell you how I learned to dive. I was actually on my college swim team, and I was going for swim practice, and we had there's a bunch of swimming pools in the gym, so I was going by the first pool, practice in the second pool, and my college club was having a session there. So they asked me if I wanted to try diving. Yeah, sure. So after my session, my training was done, I came and had a swim in the pool. And for me, just being on scuba in a pool was the most mind-blowing thing I've ever done. And right then, I knew I was hooked. I saw my first fish on dive number 30. I was a broke college student, so we used to go to a quarry in Pennsylvania to do the dives, and there's no fish there. But just the act of being underwater for me was mind-blowing. And then when I saw fish, I was like, whoa, this is like trippy. This fish, this is even better. So this is a sport that's actually it's addicting. It should be addicting. If you get into it correctly, it's something that gets you hooked for a lifetime. And for that to happen, really, that your first step has to be correct. I know a lot of people who've sort of who've sort of had a bad misstep when learning to dive. And some of it is maybe, and not just out of malice or necessarily because the dive center was cutting corners, just because there wasn't necessarily a good fit, and they didn't know what to expect, they didn't know what to ask for. So always, like, like this, you're entering a magical world, right? I mean, on one dive, you'll see, I do wildlife as well. So on one dive, you'll probably see far more species than, you go on a safari in a national park in India, you see maybe 5 or 6 mammals. You go to Africa, maybe you might see 10 or 12 on a game dive. You see 150 species on a dive while diving. That's a normal day. You'll see hunting, you'll see mating, you'll see action. So it just, and just make sure that when you're learning to dive, just aware that, at the end of the dive, you should leave the course feeling comfortable. You shouldn't leave the course feeling, you know what, I'm scared of this or scared of that or whatever. So make sure that, if you're not comfortable at the end of the course, you ask and you make sure you get that corrected. The second thing to make sure is also, it's a sport where, like, as I told you earlier, everyone starts at different levels, right? To get comfortable takes different amounts of time for different people. Ideally, if budget was not a concern, I'd take 10 days to do a certification course and have like 15, 20 dives included there, but that's not realistic. So if you finish the course, you're starting to feel good, it's a good idea to add in maybe a couple of days or more of diving after the course, or even do an advanced course after that, because then you continue to learn. And you find when you do the open water course, every day you feel a little bit better. And that continues for a few days after certification as well. So when you're planning a certification course, perhaps if you have time and budget allows, plan to maybe do at least a couple more days of diving afterwards, or even an advanced course. Then you really start to get comfortable in the water. And once you get comfortable in the water, then you get really hooked. You're not going, it doesn't become something that scares you, but it becomes something that you look forward to. So you shouldn't leave the course feeling nervous or stressed. You should feel the course feeling excited about, like, wow, this is amazing, the most amazing thing I've done. I can't wait to do more of it. Yeah. If you can do that, you've had a good open water course. So thank you for watching. Sorry, one last question. Asha, are there professional level courses? Yes, there are. Once you finish your rescue dive, we have 40 dives. You can start doing something called a dive master course. And after that, you can do an instructor course. So we've had a chat earlier on how to be on professional training. So if you message us if you just message us afterwards, I'll send you the link to that. You can watch that.
So I have a question here. What are the basic risk assessments? I don't want to go to the bookish thing, but you have experience by instructing the people face the basic risk assessment, or the things like the major minor problems people face during the initial stage.
Good question. What are some of the problems people face? The most common problem is just nervousness in the water, right? Because if you're not used to swimming or not used to being in the water, just the very act of putting your head underwater can be stressful, right? I mean, you spent your entire adult life sort of going, I can't breathe underwater. Now there's some guy with a bad goatee telling you stick your face in and breathe. It's a leap of faith. So that's the first roadblock for people, just putting the face in the water and breathing. The second common thing is that mask clearing, because when you dive, you actually breathe in and out of your mouth, right? So when you put on a mask and you get water, and you have to blow out from your nose and then breathe in again from the mouth. The moment people blow out from the nose, reflex kicks in, and they breathe in from the nose, and then they inhale whatever water is in there. There's a lot of things that may be fun to snort. Salt water is definitely not one of them. So when you have, so that's another common sort of a roadblock for people in the beginning. And the funny thing with diving is that, when you start learning, you think that as you learn, as the skills get harder, it gets harder and harder. It's not actually. It's the first 5 minutes that are the hardest for you. When you have to first put your head underwater and breathe, and then when you have to clear your mask. Because those two are like 80% of that is psychological, and sort of, people have to just learn to let go and take the leap of faith. The other skills are all mechanical skills, step 1, step 2, step 3. You might take 2 attempts, 3 attempts, 4 attempts, but those rarely block anyone from diving. It's mainly the mask, and it's the first 5 minutes is actually the biggest hurdle there. So you can get past that, you're good. Yeah? And that's why if for people who are like nervous or not good swimmers, sometimes it's a better idea to maybe do the confined water training in the home city as opposed to going somewhere. So the home city is okay. Today I can complete. I'll come back next weekend and do it. You're there on vacation for 4 or 5 days. You're like, boss, I have to do it now. or what happens, right? So that pressure is there. The pressure is on you. The pressure is also on the instructor. As instructor, also realize that, you know, if you come diving all that way, you want to get certified. You're paying money for it. You've taken vacation time that you could have spent doing other things. As an instructor, I also want to make sure that there's pressure on me as well to try to get you certified as well, right? And when this pressure is not conducive, because then just everyone's sort of trying to rush things, and that's not the best environment to learn. So yeah, so that's a trade-off between doing the full course in one place versus breaking it up in 2 locations. Yeah. So, Asher is asking, do we teach swimming? Unfortunately, Asher, we do not teach swimming. If you have if you have basic swimming skills, we can give you a couple of tips on how to make your swim stroke better. I've gone through that because I used to compete like a short distance. Now I'm doing triathlons. I have to like swim 2-3 kilometers. I've been working on some small techniques there. So we can teach you ways to make your swimming more efficient, but we don't really teach swimming per se. It's best to take those classes at home before you go on vacation somewhere.
Vinny, I had a question. Could I ask? Sneha here. Yeah, so again, this is more from the same thing that, you know, my brother would be joining me for scuba for this course. So what if once we reach there, we've spoken to a doctor and we have done some swimming classes here and all of that. But when he actually gets there and when he's trying to do the open water course, if he doesn't feel so good about it or for some reason he's not able to do it, so then in such a situation, what happens then?
So now here's where it gets a bit tricky, because different dive centers have different policies, right? And it depends. In some places, once you sign up for a course, there's no refund. And this is also something you guys should check as well before you go. That's it. You've paid for the course. You do as much as you can. If you can't, okay. Other places generally, like for example, with us, it's you pay for what you do, right? So if you're doing a course that basically then you know, we get you started, and if you find right away that within, as I said, the first 5 minutes, once you start getting the water, you're like, this is not for me. I'm not enjoying it. I'm really unhappy doing this. I don't want to do this. Then you stop and pay only for what you've done so far. And and then there's a little bit of a give and take there as well, right? Because you might some people, you know, when they know they can't do it, they know they can't do it, and they just, other people just sometimes just requires them a little bit of a push. Or sometimes as an instructor, sometimes I see people getting frustrated, and I'm looking at them going, you know what? I know you can do this because I've taught enough people to know, and I see signs that you're getting better. But you know, while the student might be getting frustrated, I can see the progress. I know they're not that far from completing the course. So there's a little bit of give and go. There's a human element there, right? And some people, you know, so yeah, there's no single answer like on what it should be.
Understand. Yeah. Okay.
But in this case, what you can probably do is, what's home for you? Which city?
Bangalore.
Bangalore. Okay. So once the lockdown starts, for example, you can come and join us for a pool session there, and maybe even do the first confined water session there, and see how you like it, how your brother likes it. And if he likes it, and he can choose to do it with us, do it anywhere, whatever. But at least it gives him an idea of what he thinks of the sport, right?
Sure.
That's an option there. Yeah. So things like that.
Okay, sure. Thank you.
Yeah, keep in mind, guys, it's supposed to be fun. If you're diving and every time you go diving, you're like, oh, Jesus, I can't believe I'm doing this. That's not fun. You know, then do something else. Right? Do something else you enjoy. But at the same time, also keep in mind that sometimes you may have to work through a little bit of discomfort, but the payoff is also worth it. So whether the effort is too high or not is a personal decision. And, you know, that's there.
Understand. Thank you.
Okay. So guys, any other questions? Cool. Okay, well, thank you for watching. If you do think of any questions afterwards, drop us an email, let us know. And hopefully, you know, if you go diving, whether if you come diving with us or elsewhere, if you have a good time, let us know how it went as well. Yeah? Thank you for watching, and we'll see you hopefully see you here, or if not, see you in the water somewhere. See you guys.